The family sent the ugly black daughter as a joke, but she was what the rancher always wanted, cruel laughter echoing through the grand dining room as the scorned daughter silently serves those who mock her daily. The wealthy matriarch and her favored children view this brilliant woman as their greatest burden, whispering behind gloved hands about her unmarriageable fate. They assume she'll remain their shameful secret forever, hidden from polite society. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles west, a weathered rancher pens a letter seeking not beauty, but a partner with practical skills and strong character. The exact qualities this dismissed daughter possesses in abundance. When his proposal arrives, the cruel family sees their perfect opportunity for a vicious prank. But what they don't know is that their victim has been secretly documenting their darkest financial secrets, evidence that could destroy them all. Will their malicious joke become their own undoing? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The crystal glasses clinked against fine china as the Adebayo family gathered around their mahogany dining table. Eudora quietly refilled water pitchers, while her mother, Naomi, gestured dismissively in her direction. "At least she's useful for something," Naomi said with a bitter laugh, "though I can't imagine what we'll do with her permanently." Eudora's younger sisters giggled behind their napkins. They had inherited their mother's sharp features and social graces. Eudora had inherited her father's brilliant mind for numbers, though no one seemed to notice or care. She retreated to the study after dinner, spreading the family's financial ledgers across the desk. The numbers told a disturbing story. Despite their grand estate and lavish lifestyle, the Adebayos were drowning in debt. Their cotton investments had failed spectacularly. Their business partnerships were collapsing. Eudora had been quietly managing the crisis for months. She renegotiated payment terms with creditors. She identified which assets could be sold discreetly. She found legal loopholes that bought them precious time. Her family remained oblivious to her efforts. They assumed their continued wealth was simply their natural right. The morning mail brought "Poor man has no idea what he's asking for," her youngest sister Clara said. "It would serve him right for being so presumptuous," added middle sister Grace. Naomi smiled coldly. "Indeed. Let him discover what he gets for making such ridiculous requests. We'll send our dear Eudora as his practical bride." Eudora felt heat rise in her cheeks, but beneath the humiliation, something else stirred. Hope. This rancher wanted practical skills. He valued strong character over social connections. Perhaps he might actually appreciate what she had to offer. "I'll go," Eudora said quietly. Her family exchanged amused glances. They had expected resistance, tears, pleading. Her calm acceptance caught them off guard. "Wonderful," Naomi said. "We'll arrange your passage immediately." Eudora spent the next week preparing for her journey west. She carefully packed her most important possession, a leather satchel containing detailed records of suspicious financial transactions she had discovered in her father's business dealings. Land deals that seemed too profitable, partnerships with questionable characters, money flowing through accounts that didn't officially exist. She had been documenting everything, sensing something wasn't quite legal about their family's remaining income sources. Her mathematical mind had detected patterns that troubled her deeply. The stagecoach journey proved as unpleasant as expected. Word had spread about the Adebayo family's cruel joke. Fellow passengers whispered and stared. They seemed to find entertainment in her situation. When a young woman traveling alone fell ill with fever, Eudora quietly tended to her. She shared her own medicine and food. She dampened cloths to cool the woman's burning forehead. The other passengers watched with surprise. They had expected coldness from someone her family had rejected. Instead, They witnessed genuine compassion. Eudora arrived at Silver Creek Ranch as the sun set behind rolling hills. The property was vast, but showed signs of struggle. Fences needed repair. Buildings needed fresh paint. Everything looked functional but barely maintained. Lee Montgomery emerged from the main house. He was tall and weathered, with kind eyes and calloused hands. He looked nothing like the refined gentleman her sister, skeptical about what she might accomplish. Within an hour, Eudora had identified 3 major problems. Lee was paying inflated prices for supplies. He was missing payment deadlines that triggered penalty fees. He was undercharging for his cattle because he hadn't researched current market rates. "You could increase your profits by 30% with simple adjustments," she told him. Lee stared at the organized stacks of papers she had created. Everything was labeled, categorized, and explained in clear handwriting. "Your family said you were unmarriageable," he said slowly. "They did. They were wrong." For the first time in years, Eudora smiled genuinely. This weathered rancher saw something in her that her own family had missed entirely. Lee Montgomery had asked for practical skills and strong character. He was about to discover he had found both in the woman her family had sent as their cruelest joke. Neither of them suspected that Eudora's hidden knowledge would soon make her the most valuable woman in 3 territories, or that the family's malicious prank would unleash consequences they never could have imagined. Within 3 days, Eudora had transformed Lee's chaotic ranch office into a model of efficiency. Every bill was categorized by priority and due date. Every contract was reviewed and renegotiated where possible. Every expense was tracked and analyzed for potential savings. Lee watched in amazement as she worked. Her fingers moved across the ledger pages with the precision of a master craftsman. She caught mathematical errors that had been costing him hundreds of dollars annually. She identified suppliers who had been overcharging him for years. "How did you learn to do this?" he asked one evening as she finished reconciling his accounts. "My father's business was complex. I started helping with simple calculations when I was 12. By 16, I was managing most of his financial operations." "And your family never valued this?" Eudora's smile was bitter. "They valued the results, never the person who achieved them." Lee studied her face in the lamplight. She was nothing like the society beauties he had occasionally encountered at cattle auctions. Her features were strong rather than delicate. Her hands showed the calluses of real work. Her eyes held intelligence that seemed to manage in a year. "Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me." The room fell silent. Lee Montgomery was respected throughout the county. His public support carried weight. But Eudora's real test came when Marcus Whitfield arrived at the ranch. Whitfield was everything Lee was not. Polished, wealthy, and smooth-talking. He owned the largest spread in 3 counties. His clothes were tailored. His boots were spotless. His smile never reached his eyes. "Montgomery," he said, dismounting from his expensive horse. "I hear congratulations are in order." "Thank you kindly." Whitfield's gaze swept over Eudora dismissively. "I also hear you're having some financial difficulties." "Lucky for you, I'm prepared to make a generous offer." He produced a contract from his saddlebags. "I'll buy your ranch for $20,000, cash payment within the week." Lee frowned. "The ranch is worth at least $30,000. In good times, perhaps. But with cattle prices falling and railroad costs rising, $20,000 is more than fair." Eudora had been listening quietly, but now she stepped forward. "May I see the contract, Mr. Whitfield?" His eyebrows raised in surprise. "This is business between men, Mrs. Montgomery." "My wife handles our business affairs," Lee said firmly. Whitfield reluctantly handed over the papers. Eudora read carefully, her trained eye catching details others might miss. "This contract requires payment of all outstanding debts before transfer of ownership," she noted. "But you've listed debts that don't exist." According to these figures, Mr. Montgomery owes nearly $15,000 in various fees and penalties. Those are legitimate charges. To whom? I've reviewed every account. These creditors don't appear in any of our records. Whitfield's smile tightened. Perhaps your record-keeping isn't as thorough as you believe. Perhaps your contract isn't as honest as you claim. The tension in the air was palpable. Whitfield clearly wasn't accustomed to being challenged, especially by someone he considered beneath notice. "I'll give you time to reconsider," he said coldly. "But my offer won't stand indefinitely." After he left, Lee turned to fake creditors appear in transactions across 3 states. Always the same names. Always the same amounts. How could you possibly know that? Because I documented identical schemes in Mississippi. My family was involved with men who used these exact tactics to steal land from struggling farmers. Lee's eyes widened as the implications sank in. "You're saying this is organized?" "I'm saying Marcus Whitfield is part of a criminal network, and I have evidence that could destroy them all." The weight of her revelations settled between them. Eudora wasn't just a brilliant bookkeeper. She was a woman who had stumbled onto one of the largest fraud operations in the American West. Her family had sent her away as a joke. They had no idea they had just armed their greatest enemy with the knowledge to bring down their entire corrupt empire. Lee reached across the table and took her hand. "What do we do?" "We gather more evidence. We protect ourselves. And when the time is right, we make sure justice is served." Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. But inside the small ranch house, 2 people had found something more valuable than gold. They had found a partnership built on truth, respect, and shared purpose. The family's cruel joke was about to become their worst nightmare. Eudora spread the contents of her leather satchel across Lee's kitchen table. 3 years of meticulous documentation lay before them. Bank records, forged contracts, and correspondence between corrupt officials filled every available surface. "I started collecting this evidence when I noticed discrepancies in my father's accounts," she explained. "Payments to companies that didn't exist. Land transfers that happened impossibly fast. Money disappearing from accounts overnight." Lee studied a contract dated 2 years prior. The signature belonged to Marcus Whitfield. He was operating in Mississippi too? Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arkansas. Always the same pattern. Target struggling landowners, create fake debts, force quick sales, then resell the land to railroad companies for triple the price. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Dozens of families had lost their homes. Entire communities had been destroyed. Also, men like Whitfield could profit from manufactured misery. In the region. "We understand you've been asking questions about local property transactions. I've been managing my husband's accounts. We suggest you limit your management to domestic affairs. Some questions are dangerous for a woman to ask." Lee stepped onto the porch beside his wife. "Are you threatening my family?" "We're offering friendly advice. Accept Mr. Whitfield's generous offer. Leave Texas. Find somewhere quieter to settle down." After the men departed, Eudora began connecting more pieces of the puzzle. She visited other ranchers in the area, ostensibly making social calls. What she discovered was systematic intimidation. The Hendersons had received an unexpected tax bill for $3,000. The Pattersons were being sued by a creditor they had never heard of. The Williams family found their cattle dying mysteriously, forcing them toward bankruptcy. Every family faced the same solution: sell to Marcus Whitfield at bargain prices. "It's brilliant in its simplicity," Eudora told Lee that evening. Create artificial pressure. Offer the only escape route. Most people are too desperate or too scared to investigate. But you're not most people. No, I'm not. Eudora's investigation revealed the full scope of Whitfield's network. Judge Crawford signed fraudulent court orders. Sheriff Barnes refused to investigate suspicious crimes. Banker Morrison created false loan documents on demand. The conspiracy reached into every level of local government and business. Whitfield wasn't just stealing land. He was stealing democracy itself. Their breakthrough came when Eudora discovered the railroad connection. Every property Whitfield acquired was immediately resold to Continental Railroad at massive profits. The railroad needed specific routes for their western expansion. They didn't care how Whitfield obtained the land, as long as the titles were clean. He's not just a local criminal, Eudora realized. He's the advance man for a corporate takeover. They're clearing entire counties for railroad development. The personal cost of their investigation became apparent when anonymous threats began appearing. Notes slipped under their door at night. Messages left on fence posts. Always the same warning. Stop asking questions or face consequences. Lee assumed ownership and forged the necessary paperwork. "This isn't just fraud," Eudora said, her voice filled with amazement. "This is theft from the United States government. We're talking about federal crimes punishable by decades in prison." The evidence was overwhelming, but dangerous. Every document she possessed implicated powerful men who had already demonstrated their willingness to use violence and intimidation. Lee found her working late into the night, copying the most important records in her precise handwriting. "What are you doing?" "Making backup copies. If something happens to the originals, we need proof of what we discovered." "Nothing is going to happen to the originals. Nothing is going to happen to us." Eudora looked up from her work. "My family thought they were untouchable too. They controlled judges and sheriffs and bankers, but corruption always collapses eventually. The question is whether we'll be around to see justice served." Outside their window, riders circled the property in the darkness. The pressure was building toward an inevitable confrontation. Eudora had been sent west as her family's cruel joke. Now she possessed evidence that could destroy not just Whitfield's criminal empire, but the corrupt network that had sent her away in the first place. The woman everyone had dismissed as worthless had become the most dangerous person in 3 territories. Soon, everyone would discover exactly how wrong they had been about Eudora Montgomery. Eudora transformed the ranch's spare bedroom into a makeshift courtroom. She arranged evidence by date and significance. Maps covered one wall showing property transfers across 4 states. Financial records filled 3 wooden crates. Witness testimonies occupied an entire desk. Her documentation revealed a criminal enterprise spanning 15 years. Whitfield's network had stolen over 200,000 acres of land. They had displaced more than 60 families. The profits exceeded $500,000. Lee helped her create visual presentations that even illiterate ranchers could understand. They used colored string to connect related documents. They made charts showing money flowing from victims to conspirators. They prepared a timeline of crimes dating back to 1860. "This is more thorough than most federal investigations," Lee observed. "It has to be." Had never signed. The handwriting on the loan documents didn't match her husband's signature on their marriage certificate. James Williams brought samples of poisoned grain he had found near his cattle troughs. The grain contained arsenic in quantities that would kill livestock within hours. Each story added another piece to Eudora's comprehensive case. The conspiracy was larger and more vicious than she had initially suspected. "They destroy people systematically," she told Lee after documenting the Williams family's ordeal. "Create the crisis, offer the solution, profit from the desperation." But convincing victims to testify publicly proved challenging. Most families were terrified of retaliation. They had seen what happened to neighbors who refused Whitfield's offers. Mysterious accidents, unexplained fires, sudden disappearances. Eudora spent weeks earning their trust. She visited their homes personally. She shared her own story of family betrayal and exile. She demonstrated her mathematical proof of the conspiracy's scope. Gradually, courage replaced fear. The Henderson family agreed to testify about their fraudulent tax bill. The Patterson family would present evidence of forged loan documents. The Williams family would describe the systematic poisoning of their livestock. "People are starting to believe we can actually win this fight," Lee said after their 20th witness agreed to cooperate. "Believing isn't enough. We need absolute proof that even corrupt judges can't dismiss." Eudora's breakthrough came when she discovered Whitfield's personal account ledgers. A disgruntled bookkeeper from the Silver Creek Bank provided copies in exchange for guaranteed protection from retaliation. The ledgers contained detailed records of bribes paid to government officials. Judge Crawford received $200 monthly. Sheriff Barnes got $150 plus bonuses for ignoring specific crimes. Banker Morrison earned $300 for creating false loan documents. More importantly, the ledgers revealed the true scope of the railroad conspiracy. Continental Railroad had paid Whitfield over $200,000 for illegally acquired land. The railroad executives knew they were purchasing stolen property. They had correspondence discussing the need for creative acquisition methods in their western expansion. "This implicates people in Washington," Eudora said, studying the railroad correspondence. Territory. Government officials would attend. Newspaper reporters would cover the event. Most importantly, Territorial Judge William Harrison would be present to deliver the keynote address. Judge Harrison had a reputation for incorruptible integrity. He had prosecuted government officials in 3 territories. He was known for his thorough investigations and harsh sentences for land fraud. "If we can present our evidence to Judge Harrison publicly, Whitfield can't silence us or destroy the proof," Eudora explained to her growing network of supporters. She spent 2 weeks preparing the perfect presentation. Every document was organized and labeled. Every witness was coached on their testimony. Every chart was designed for maximum visual impact. The plan required precise timing. Judge Harrison would speak at 2 o'clock. Eudora would request permission to present evidence of federal crimes during the public forum that followed his address. Once she began speaking, the law required that her testimony be recorded officially. "Are you ready for this?" Lee asked the night before the festival. "I've been ready since the day my family sent me away." They thought they were getting rid of a problem. Instead, they created their worst nightmare. Eudora's evidence would expose not just Whitfield's local crimes, but the entire network of corruption that stretched from Texas to Washington. The family that had rejected her as worthless was about to discover that their cruel joke had unleashed justice across 4 states. Tomorrow, the woman everyone had dismissed would stand before hundreds of witnesses and prove that truth was more powerful than money, influence, or intimidation. The Harvest Festival would become the day Marcus Whitfield's criminal empire finally collapsed. The Silver Creek Harvest Festival buzzed with activity under cloudless autumn skies. Families spread blankets across the town square. Children ran between food stalls selling fresh apple cider and roasted corn. Musicians tuned their instruments on a wooden platform decorated with colorful ribbons. Eudora arrived carrying 2 leather cases containing 3 years of evidence. She wore her finest dress, a simple blue cotton that had belonged to her grandmother. Lee walked beside her, his Sunday coat pressed and his boots polished. They looked like any other ranch couple celebrating the harvest. They looked nothing like the people about to expose the largest criminal conspiracy in territorial history. Marcus Whitfield held court near piercing blue eyes. His reputation for honesty had earned him respect across the Western Territories. His voice carried clearly across the square as he spoke about justice, progress, and the rule of law. "Our great territory was built by honest men and women who worked hard for what they achieved," he declared. We must always remain vigilant against those who would corrupt our institutions for personal gain." Whitfield's smile flickered momentarily. Several of his associates shifted uncomfortably. When Judge Harrison finished his address, he opened the floor for community comments. This was standard procedure at territorial festivals. Citizens could raise concerns or share information relevant to local governance. Eudora stood up from her blanket. "Your Honor, I request permission to present evidence of federal crimes affecting this community." The square fell silent. Judge Harrison studied her with professional interest. "State your name and the nature of these alleged crimes." "Eudora Montgomery. I have documented evidence of systematic land fraud involving federal officials, railroad executives, and local authorities." Whitfield's face went pale. He whispered urgently to Sheriff Barnes, who began moving through the crowd toward Eudora. "You have the floor, Mrs. Montgomery," Judge Harrison said formally. Eudora opened her first leather case and withdrew a large map of Silver Creek County. She held it high enough for the entire crowd to see. "This map shows property ownership according to Federal Land Office records from 1862, she announced. "These areas marked in red belong to the United States government. They have never been legally sold or transferred to private ownership." She produced a second map, this one showing current ownership claims. This map shows the same properties now claimed by Marcus Whitfield and his associates. Over 50,000 acres of federal land have been illegally transferred through forged documents and fraudulent sales. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People craned their necks to see the maps. Judge Harrison stepped down from the platform to examine the evidence more closely. "Furthermore," Eudora continued, opening her second case, "I have financial records proving systematic bribery of government officials." Judge Crawford received monthly payments totaling over addressed the crowd directly. "How many of you have received mysterious tax bills you couldn't afford? How many have been sued by creditors you never borrowed from? How many have lost your land to manufactured debts?" Hands began rising throughout the square. First a few, then dozens. The scope of victimization became visually apparent to everyone present. Samuel Henderson stood up from his family's blanket. "She helped us prove our tax bill was fraudulent. We owe nothing to anyone." Martha Patterson rose to her feet. "She showed us that our loan documents were forged. My husband never signed those papers." James Williams joined them. "She identified the poison that killed our cattle. Someone was sabotaging our ranch to force us into bankruptcy." One by one, Whitfield's victims found the courage to speak publicly. Their testimonies painted a picture of systematic criminal enterprise stretching back over a decade. Judge Harrison studied the evidence with growing anger. The documentation was thorough, compelling, and damning. The mathematical analysis was beyond dispute. "Mr. Whitfield," he said finally, "you are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and theft of federal property. Sheriff Barnes, you are also under arrest for accepting bribes and obstruction of justice." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Children who had been playing stopped to watch the dramatic scene. Families who had lived in fear for years finally saw justice being served. Whitfield made one last desperate attempt to discredit Eudora. "She's nothing but an ugly reject her own family couldn't stand. Why would you believe her over respected businessmen?" Judge Harrison's response silenced the entire square. "I believe evidence, Mr. Whitfield, and this evidence proves that Mrs. Montgomery possesses more intelligence, courage, and integrity than every man in your criminal organization combined." The woman sent away as a family joke had just destroyed the most powerful criminal network in 4 territories. Her brilliant mind and unwavering determination had achieved what law enforcement had failed to accomplish for 15 years. Marcus Whitfield was led away in chains while the crowd continued cheering for the woman who had saved their community. 6 months after the harvest festival that changed everything, Eudora Montgomery stood before the newly constructed Silver Creek schoolhouse. 23 children sat at Eudora's evidence. They found her documentation so thorough that it expedited prosecutions across 4 territories. Corrupt officials were removed from office. Stolen land was returned to rightful owners. Families received compensation for their losses. The Silver Creek Tribune published a front-page story calling her the lady who saved our county. Other newspapers picked up the story. Soon, requests for assistance arrived from communities facing similar corruption. Eudora had inadvertently created a new profession, consulting detective specializing in financial crimes. Her business operated from a converted room in the ranch house. Filing cabinets contained active cases from Texas to California. A large map on the wall marked locations where she had exposed criminal networks. Red pins indicated successful prosecutions. The map was covered with red pins. Lee watched from the doorway as she finished the mathematics lesson. Pride filled his chest as he observed his wife's natural teaching ability. She had transformed from the dismissed daughter into the most respected woman in 3 counties. "Class dismissed," Eudora announced. "Remember to practice your multiplication tables." The children filed out cheerfully, several stopping to thank her for the lesson. Young Mary Henderson lingered behind. "Mrs. Montgomery, my father says you saved our farm." "Your father saved your farm by having the courage to tell the truth. I just helped improve it." After Mary left, Eudora found Lee waiting with a letter bearing familiar handwriting. "From Mississippi?" she asked. "Your mother." Eudora opened the envelope without enthusiasm. Naomi's flowery script covered 3 pages of desperate flattery and transparent manipulation. Her family had discovered her newfound fame and success. They wanted to reconcile. They claimed they had always believed in her potential. They suggested she return home to help manage their recovered finances. Most telling was the final paragraph. They had received visits from federal investigators asking questions about their business practices. They needed her expertise to navigate the legal complications. "She wants you to come back," Lee observed. "She wants me to save them from the consequences of their own corruption, just like I always did." Eudora walked to the fireplace and tossed the letter into the flames. She felt signatures from 67 families whose lives she had saved or improved. "We wanted you to know that you're not just respected here," Martha added. "You're loved." Eudora's eyes filled with tears. She had spent her entire life craving this kind of acceptance and belonging. Now she had found it in the most unexpected place, among people who valued character over appearance and substance over status. The next morning brought news that completed her vindication. A telegram from Washington announced that Marcus Whitfield had been sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. His criminal network had been dismantled completely. The railroad executives who had purchased stolen land faced their own prosecutions. More satisfying was the postscript. Investigations triggered by Eudora's evidence had exposed similar corruption in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arkansas. Her own family's illegal activities had been discovered. They faced significant fines and possible imprisonment. The cruel joke had become perfect justice. Lee found her reading the telegram in their kitchen. Sunlight streamed through clean windows onto organized shelves and polished surfaces. Everything reflected the order and purpose she had brought to their lives. "Any regrets?" he asked. "About what?" "Leaving your family behind. Choosing this life over the one they planned for you." Eudora looked around their modest but happy home. She thought about the children who learned from her every day, the families she had helped rebuild their lives, the community that had embraced her completely. "They didn't plan any life for me," she said. "They planned to be rid of me. The life I have now is the one I chose for myself." Lee kissed her forehead gently. And what a magnificent choice it was. Outside their window, Silver Creek bustled with honest commerce and genuine community. Families worked their own land without fear of mysterious debts or fraudulent claims. Children played without worry that their homes might disappear overnight. Eudora Montgomery had been sent west as her family's cruelest joke. She had become the most valuable woman in the American territories. She had found love, respect, purpose, and belonging in the place where she was finally seen for who she truly was. The woman everyone had dismissed as worthless had proved that true